On this, there's never really changed in numbers much. 150, 200 pairs is about the norm, and it just chugs on from that year to year. You might expect it to increase, and I would certainly expect it to increase, but for some reason it doesn't. Down here.
The skipper on the boat gives a good commentary during the trip, but it isn't always easy to hear because depending on where you sit on the boat, if you're near the engine, is almost inaudible, but if you're at the front of the boat it comes through quite clearly, and he's very knowledgeable on the birds, on the farns. He knows all about the different species and the numbers and the breeding rates, and he's giving this commentary all the time we're moving. Seals also breed on the farms, but they don't breed till November. But they do spend a lot of time just loafing around on seaweed, warming up. It's a lovely warm day for a seal or anybody else, and that's a nice bed of seaweed he's sitting on. All these birds are known as pelagic species. That means they spend their whole lives at sea, except for the short period during June and July when they come ashore to these islands for 5 or 6 weeks to breed. After their breeding season they disperse to the oceans, and we really don't know how far they go or where they go, but probably in the North Atlantic.
The waters haven't quite finished their count this year, but last year we had close on 44,000 individual guillemots. All the other birds are counted pairs, but the first guillemots don't build nests, lists, and it's very much an average working out. You knock off your highest count, knock off your lowest count, and then average the other rate out. So where the count might say 43,869, I think the adult male will come down to the sea, call for his youngster, and despite the fact that there's 40,000 odd birds, every chick knows his father's call, and
all the breeding isn't synchronized exactly, because while some of these guillemots and razorbills have young already and the young are already swimming in the sea, some are still sitting on eggs and still laying eggs, so the season is extended a bit in that fashion.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was looking at that one, yeah. These are those starters, which I'll tell you what's next. You look just at the bottom of the pinnacles here, there's one razorbill, black and white bird.
Landing on the farms isn't a simple matter by any means. When I was a younger man, I tried for 7 years to get to the farms. I went across from Carlisle hoping to sail across to the farms, and by the time I'd got to the farm, got to sea houses anyway, the boatman said the swell had risen, or the water had become rough, or the sea mist had blown in and we couldn't go, and 7 times we tried. The public are only allowed on 2 of the islands, but there's enough to see and do on 2 islands without trying to disturb the birds on other smaller islands. And as you can see, the Arctic terns in particular are very aggressive. When people approach the nesting site, they will attack and they will actually peck your head and draw blood, so most people have to wear a hat, if you have any sense. The boardwalks on the island are very useful, because otherwise you'd be walking among plants and things and you wouldn't see where you were going, so it's much safer to have a boardwalk. You're not allowed to stray from the boardwalk, because a lot of these birds are nesting right by the side of the boardwalk, and sometimes within a foot of the edge of the boardwalk. As you can see by these birds here, they hold their ground even when you're standing within a couple of feet of them, and they're squawking and calling all the time. They can't be too much disturbed though, because they don't fly off. If they were too disturbed, they'd fly off. There are young birds all over the place in June and July, and some birds are still sitting on eggs, so there's a week or 2 difference between the first birds that are hatched and the last ones. The parent birds are very protective of their young, and they need to be, because if they weren't there, the herring gulls and black-backed gulls would simply come down and pick the chicks up and eat them, because it's easy for a gull of that size to eat a chick whole, which they do. In fact, they eat puffins whole, not only chicks. These Arctic terns, when they've finished breeding on the Farne Islands, will leave Britain and fly across the Atlantic and all the way down the coast of North America and South America, and they end up somewhere on the east side of South America, and their total migration there and back to the Farne Islands is about 15,000 miles, which is the longest migration of any bird on Earth. The eggs, as you can see, are very well camouflaged. And they need to be well camouflaged because the herring gulls steal eggs at every opportunity. That's why the parents are reluctant to leave the nest at any time. All the birds on the farms are panting like this on a hot day, because it's the only way they have of perspiring. They don't perspire through their skin, but through their mouths and throats. This flock here is a colony of sandwich terns, which are larger than the Arctic terns, with a more raucous call, but they're easily recognized by their appearance and their call. On a hot day like this, the sea mist is appearing, and it's gradually obscuring Bamborough Castle in the background there. This is one of the bogies of the east coast, because even on beautiful summer days you get sea mist, and this often is a cause of cancelling the trips to the Farne Islands. There's great competition for space on the pinnacles on the Farne Islands, and birds like these shags nest very close to guillemots and razorbills, but as long as they're out of range of the bill, they're quite safe. There's usually just a few inches between one nest and the next. This is a kittiwake, and they nest on the tiniest ledges, precipitous cliffs, and it looks quite dangerous to our eyes, but they sit there with their eggs and chicks till the chicks ready to fly. It's frightening to look over the edge sometimes at these birds and positions they're in. You can see there's an ample food supply because these shags, which are only a matter of days old, have doubled their size in less than a week. And there was a time when the sand eels, which is the principal food of all these birds, were quite scarce in the seas around the Farne Islands, and it was cause for concern because the breeding rate dropped precipitously, but the sand eels seem to have recovered, and so have the birds. This is a razorbill, and you can see by the shape of its bill where it gets its name. You can see how close that kittiwake is nesting to the shags, but as long as it's out of range of the bill, it's quite safe. They're a very peaceful looking bird, I think, the kittiwake. Bird watching here on the Farnes, I think, is as good as anywhere in the world. To see colonies like this, it's every bit as exciting as seeing colonies of penguins or red-winged blackbirds in America or Keelias in Kenya. And it's a real bonus to be able to photograph shags at this range. I'm just about 4 feet from the birds here. Normally you see them when they're on the sea at half a mile away. If you haven't been to the Farnes, I can thoroughly recommend it. It's an exciting day, as good as anything anywhere else in the world, and if you're fit enough to jump on and off the boat, that's all you've got to worry about, because the paths are ideal and the boardwalks are quite safe. There's no refreshments on the island, so you need to take a flask, because you certainly get dry on a hot day like this and you need a drink of some sort in your rucksack. We're back at Sea Houses now, and we're not happy to be back. We could have stayed there a week, it was so exciting.
Thank you.